showers feeding through, particularly across Wales and central areas of the UK, eventually dying out through the early hours of the morning, leaving plenty of clear spells. Still plenty of showers, longer spells of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland though. But with clearer skies, that means temperatures should soon dip away, so likely feeling chillier compared to recent nights. Then to start off tomorrow, there should be plenty of dry and bright weather around, still those showers in the north. Just need to keep an eye on this area of rain just starting to clip in to the far southwest during the morning. A mix of dry spells and showers across much of England and Wales, some longer spells of rain around western coasts of Northern Ireland. Similar across the northeast of Scotland, some outbreaks of rain here, likely falling as snow across hills, and a good breeze moving along those northeastern coasts too. But for much of the day, many of us will see plenty of dry weather. Still those showers though feeding in around coast of Northern Ireland and northeast Scotland, and then it's later on into the afternoon we'll see outbreaks of rain start to clip southern coast. It's going to be a very wet and windy day on offer across the Channel Islands, so the worst of the weather here, but elsewhere seeing a slightly drier day on offer, and with temperatures round about average for the time of year, though slightly milder across the south. As we head into Thursday, a ridge of high pressure means much more sunshine around, plenty of dry weather once this area of rain moves away from the far southeast. Still can't rule out a few showers, particularly once again around coasts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but for many, plenty of dry weather and lots of sunshine around too. Still some dry weather for Friday, though can't rule out some rain, particularly as we head towards the weekend, and temperatures remaining around average.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
People living with obesity are people, and they deserve the right for treatment and care as much as anyone else. What we need to understand is that obesity is a chronic condition, or a disease, as some people call it. It's not a choice. And this is the bit that people really struggle with, is that people think this is a lifestyle choice and people have done this to themselves. What we now know is the science and the evidence shows us that this isn't a choice. People have genetic predispositions for living with obesity. What we need to do is be a bit more compassionate and caring to people that live with obesity and support them to make healthier choices, not actually just discriminate and tell them that they're doing something wrong when, you know, if I had asthma, for instance, you wouldn't be saying the same thing to me there. But then it's exactly the same.
Usually if you're going for an operation of some form or other, there'll be often there is a criteria. So my mother, she had a knee operation. They wanted to make sure her blood pressure was right and all these things. This is, I mean, to hear somebody say that obesity isn't a choice just because you've got genetic predisposition to it, it's just exactly why people seem to be legitimizing being overweight. Ozempic has proved that people are overweight because they eat too much. Because Ozempic tells you to stop eating, it makes you think that you've eaten and makes you feel full, so you don't eat. You may be predisposed to anything, but you also have a large percentage of responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. So absolutely, it is in the patient's best interests, because if you're overweight, it'll take you longer to heal. You're more likely to have complications, the same if you smoke, and also the outcomes are usually better. So for a smoker, if you quit, say 4 weeks before surgery, you're 25%, your risk is lower of respiratory complications. So this is literally, of course, it's discriminatory, because you have to decide, you have to prioritise the people that are likely to survive the operations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, So we are here today to say, USA, you obey! USA, you obey! The 3 years on its way! 3 years on its way!
Radical Islam is spreading.
Sharia for UK! Sharia for UK!
Oh my God.
Home Office advisors used this.
A week cash, you can have, mate.
To minimise Islamist terrorism and tried to criminalise people for this.
There is a growing feeling of anger in this country that we are living through two-tier policing and a two-tier justice system.
Those Home Office staff need to be sacked now, and while we're at it...
Open the door, it's the police!
Should children prosecuted for their role in a summer disorder have their criminal records quashed? Also tonight... Britain's population is set to rise by 5 million in 10 years, all down to mass migration. Should we have a one-in, one-out policy? Plus... bin collections just once a month, potholes everywhere, yet your council tax might go up 25%. Oh, and...
The former Treasury Minister Stephen Timms is being treated for stab wounds in an East London hospital.
A Labour MP who was stabbed by a radical Islamist broke Labour Party rules and attended an event with the Muslim Council of Britain. Does this show how desperate Labour are for the Muslim vote? Also tonight...
Sit down there! Stop around! Well, Beth is here. You can see Boris Johnson's speech when it happens around lunch.
Sky News is losing the ratings war, so they're going off linear telly. And the government might make people who don't even watch terrestrial television pay the BBC licence fee. What time to be alive? Oh, and disgraced referee David Coote does a Schofield and comes out as gay after a massive scandal. And Hollywood celebrities continue to embarrass themselves.
I just wanted to say that I'm so sorry. All my people are getting attacked.
I don't think we arrested any families. We've arrested public safety threats and national security threats, bottom line.
On my panel tonight is former Tory Minister for Common Sense, Esther McVey, GB News presenter Alex Armstrong and journalist Jonathan Liss. Oh, and why is this roly-poly rapper in the news?
I can fit in this car.
But believe me, you can.
Yes, I can.
Believe me. So, I'm sorry.
Get ready, Britain, here we go. It's time to sack Home Office staff. Next.
Very good evening to you from the newsroom. It is just after 9 o'clock. The top story tonight. The UK's population is set to soar by nearly 5 million people over the next decade, driven almost entirely by net migration, according to new figures from the Office for National Statistics. That means that by the middle of 2032, the UK population will hit 72.5 million, sparking concerns over pressure on resources and services. Campaigners are also sounding the alarm over social care, with the number of over 85 set to double to 3.3 million by 2047. That's as the sector is already struggling to meet current demand. The Conservatives are calling for a legal cap on visas, but Downing Street has rejected that idea, insisting their own policies will tackle the issue more effectively. A leaked Home Office report has revealed a proposal to classify conspiracy theories, misogyny and the manosphere as extremism. But the government is pushing back, insisting there are no plans to expand the definition. The Home Office Minister Dan Jarvis says the leaked documents don't reflect current policy and were never meant to be implemented. The review commissioned by the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper also suggests new laws to crack down on harmful online content, but critics warn it could overwhelm authorities and risk missing truly dangerous extremists. The Scottish Government has launched a review of child protection following the conviction of 7 members of a Glasgow child abuse ring. That case, which saw 3 children subjected to horrific abuse in a drug den in Glasgow, has raised serious questions about how authorities failed to act despite clear signs of neglect. The Scottish Children's Minister says the situation is a horrifying failure and stressed the need for urgent action. MSPs have now questioned whether child safeguarding in Scotland is even fit for purpose. The government, though, has vowed to ensure lessons are learned and that such abuse never happens again. Donald Trump has approved Lord Peter Mandelson as the UK's next ambassador to Washington, despite concerns over his alleged links to China. A dossier reportedly handed to the FBI by American senators claimed Mandelson had ties to state-owned Chinese firms. Once branding Trump a danger to the world, Mandelson had recently praised the president's straight-talking instincts in an attempt to mend relations. Well, Whitehall sources tonight have told GB News the process is still ongoing, but that the decision brings relief after weeks of uncertainty over his nomination. He'll now expected to take up that role next month. And the government is considering a major shake-up to how the BBC is funded, with households using streaming services like Netflix and Disney potentially being hit with the licence fee. It's reported the idea is part of a menu of options under discussion, including a tax on streaming services or asking BBC radio listeners to pay the fee. Ministers are also exploring alternatives like advertising or a subscription model as viewing habits slowly shift away from traditional TV. And just before I hand you back to Patrick, take a look at this. Boom Supersonic took to the skies earlier in a historic test flight over the Mojave Desert, setting the stage for a possible return of supersonic travel. It could redefine the way we take holidays and push the boundaries of speed, and marking a significant step toward breaking the sound barrier once again. The XB-1 is expected to create a sonic boom and can potentially be heard 30 miles away. The milestone comes after some successful test flights, including one earlier this month where the jet reached 728 miles an hour. Well, after that successful test flight, a new 64-seat supersonic jet could soon take to the skies, marking the first of its kind since the Concorde. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in around an hour. Now, though, it's over to Patrick.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening, welcome along. It's time to sack Home Office staff. Home Office advisors looked at the Southport incident and used it as an opportunity to downplay Islamist extremism and class more people as far-right. They spent 5 months writing a report into the counter-terror programme Prevent that ignored the fact that Islamists are responsible for 95% of terror-related deaths since 1999 and 88% of injuries. And they decided to class jihadi terror at the same level as the Movement for Sikh Independence and the Earth Liberation Front. At the same time, they wanted people who dare to mention two-tier policing or, hey, taxpayers' money spent on migrant hotels to be classed as far-right. They said that Pakistani rape gangs were alleged grooming gangs, and they only mentioned them in the context of far-right people using them to whip up racial hatred. They are a disgrace and should be sacked for that alone, in my view. Shortly before GB News broke the leaked report, before anyone else, at 10 p.m. last night, the government got in touch to tell us that they would be rejecting the findings of said report. So, at minimum, those who wrote it should be sacked for doing bad work, shouldn't they? Like in any other business. Former Immigration Minister, now Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, has called for them to be fired. But for me, the real problem is deeper. It's cultural. Former Tory MP Andrew Griffiths was on GB News this morning alluding to it.
It's extremely disturbing that this Home Office report has reached this conclusion. The Home Secretary needs to publish this immediately so that we can all see for ourselves what and who it is that's saying these non-crime hate incidents, these attack and waste of police resources, something a Conservative Home Secretary stopped, it just keeps coming back. And there's clearly a cell within the Home Office that is not concerned about ordinary crime, ordinary policing, the sort of things that people are experiencing every day on our streets, mobile phones being stolen, burglaries not being followed up by police, in favour of this ideological approach to non-crime hate incidents.
So let's look at the circus going on behind the scenes. The Permanent Secretary of the Home Office is a diversity and faith champion. He can't even answer basic questions about illegal immigration.
Put foreign offenders aside and Albanians aside, just forget about those numbers. How many people travelling on small boats that's been refused asylum have been sent to a third country or back to their own country over the past 3 years?
I don't think we have. I
think we'll write to the committee with those numbers, Mr. Anderson.
That's staggering. That's actually
okay,
then let's do it for the last year.
I don't have a number for non-Albanian, non-FNOs.
Perhaps they might be able to help you.
Let's do last week then.
Do we have any figures about anything?
No, by the way, they didn't. And let's look deeper behind the scenes. GB News has uncovered the Home Office Muslim network. Leaked documents show the group of over 700 civil servants say they aim to, quote, promote the recruitment, retention and progression of Muslim staff in the Home Office and, quote, influence policymakers so that policy is more inclusive of Muslim needs. A Home Office whistleblower told GB News having an Islamic lobby group inside the Home Office represents a serious threat to the government's aims in combating Islamic extremism and granting asylum to those fleeing Islamic countries over religious persecution. I mean, is it any wonder that backroom staff at the Home Office want to see people like you treated as far-right terror threats for pointing out cultural problems? Is it any wonder they don't seem to think that Pakistani rape gangs are a massive problem? Is it any wonder that despite the man who reviewed Prevent in 2023 saying they need to focus on Islamism and less on the far right, at the very first opportunity they got, they did the exact opposite? No, it's not a shock, is it? But it gets worse. Keir Starmer appeared to say that police officers should focus less on non-crime hate incidents in the wake of the Alison Pearson scandal a few months ago. But now it looks like the bit of the report that this government does want to adopt is, are you ready? Clamping down on more non-crime hate incidents. So the upshot of the Southport massacre, which prompted this review into Prevent, the upshot of that, you know, where need I remind everyone that 3 little girls were killed in the most brutal fashion by a depraved lunatic who had been reported to Prevent 3 times and was known to police. The upshot of that is for police to spend more time dealing with hurty words. In the past year, police have dealt with incidents like a rude word being spelt with alphabet cups in Tesco's and a member of the public being upset about the name of a dog. 2 things here, 2 very important things. There is clearly, in my view, a rotten culture at the Home Office infested with diversity and inclusion nonsense, and they need to be sacked and cleared out. Secondly, have you ever known a government more out of touch than this? It wasn't hurty words that killed those little girls in Southport, Mr. Starmer. Let's get thoughts from our panel this evening. We've got Conservative MP Esther McVeigh, GB News presenter Alex Armstrong and journalist Jonathan Liss. Esther, I'll start with you on this. The culture behind the scenes at the Home Office, to me, is quite staggering. It goes a long way, I think, to explaining why we ended up with this report, which Labour have rightly rejected, by the way. But how do we clear that out?
Well, I might say something here, it might be a bit controversial to you, but I would say this is a minister and a Secretary of State sidestepping their responsibilities. So you, as a Secretary of State, if you're going to do a commission into something, a report, you set the boundaries, you steer the direction, you set the scope, and you set people off to find you the information. When it comes back to you, you can either say yay or nay, but to say people should be sacked, I would say that is Yvette Cooper's failings. That is the Secretaries of State and the ministers failing for asking the people who are working for them to go out and find that information. So I think they are actually, as I said, sidestepping responsibility. Let's go back to the old saying. What do they say? A bad workman blames their tools. And I'm afraid Yvette Cooper is that bad workman.
So we've had a report here, Alex, that was commissioned in the wake of the Southport atrocity. It's taken about 5 months to come to fruition, and it's just been rejected. So someone's got to go for it. In any other walk of life, you're running a business. If you set someone a task and they presented it with you after that length of time and it wasn't worth the paper it was written on, they'd have to go. So surely someone's got to go.
Well, in any normal business, they would be sacked. If this was me and my job, I'd be gone. But within the first day of that report coming out, my boss would go, what the hell is this? But the reality is, if you look at the rhetoric that's come out of the Prime Minister's mouth, of many other front-bench Labour politicians' mouths, this report matches that. You know, this determination that people who are talking out against two-tier policing is extremist or far-right. These are the sort of things that Keir Starmer believes in. So you can't... You almost can't...
The report.
Well, they have now, because I think they've realised that it's ridiculous.
You can't have it
but the reality is... But Jonathan, my point is they may be reflecting on their terrible use of language over the last few months, going, actually, maybe we need to tone it down. It was Keir Starmer's own report into the grooming gang failures in the CPS that said this kind of rhetoric got us into this position in the first place. It allowed these thousands or hundreds of girls to be groomed and raped and potentially murdered. So we're going back into that same fashion again with this sort of report. I'm glad to see it's been rejected, but, you know, we've got to have some accountability.
Well, if Esther's right, Jonathan, then ultimately the parameters of this report and the direction with which these staff at the Home Office and the advisers are told to go in is set by ministers and maybe the Prime Minister. So do you think that Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer, even though they've rejected it now, are ultimately responsible for the contents of this report?
No, of course not. They commissioned a report. They never said that they were under any obligation to accept the findings, and they didn't accept the findings. I also don't think that we should be sort of firing people, threatening to fire people for producing conclusions that we disagree with. And I'm surprised that a free speech channel and an anti-cancel culture warrior such as yourself would be suggesting that
I don't like people doing bad work.
Fine, but this is not. But it's not bad. It's not bad work, Patrick. It's not bad work. They've rejected it. Doesn't make it bad work.
Jonathan, it's bad work if the only time that you bring up the grooming gang scandal, when you conduct a report in which it puts a huge emphasis on misogyny and the manosphere as now a leading threat to extremism, and the only time you include Pakistani rape gangs in that is to call them alleged grooming gangs and say that that's a far right issue to whip up hatred. That is bad work.
Patrick, I think that the idea of including misogyny or misogynistic inspired crime as a hate crime is a perfectly sensible one. It's one that Labour actually agreed to and endorsed going into the election, and they agreed with by Lib Dems and Greens, among others. And that is the sort of thing, by the way, that you could have probably put at the door of the Southport killer. And so many of these men are attacking women and girls. And I think it's perfectly legitimate to say, wait, if it's not Islamism, it's not far right, is there a special category of hatred?
Rape gangs as misogyny, Jonathen.
Well, I mean, that is clearly misogynistic.
This is the thing.
One of the examples of the report is to make that.
Jonathan, the reality is it's inconvenient because the people at the Home Office, as Patrick said, it's full of DEI. And if they were to go out with this report and say, actually, we know there's a problem in certain communities, certain cultures with misogyny, which we would like to class as this level of extremism, particularly with the grooming gangs that we've seen over the last few years, I mean, decades, actually, should I say, that we actually need to classify it like this. They'll go, no, that's racist. Well, that's exactly the kind of rhetoric the Prime Minister has slapped down, and thankfully he has.
Let's be honest, because you've had quite a lot of experience of looking underneath the bonnet of how government works. Do you think that DEI or things like have been alluded to here about the fact that maybe there is this Home Office Muslim network, for example, do have an influence when it comes to reports like this?
So when I was made a Minister for Common Sense, a big chunk of work I did for 6 months, which was then completed in guidance, which is one thing, depoliticising the civil service, which shouldn't be. Well, the Labour Party laughed at it. Of course they should be. No, they shouldn't. The things that I got rid of on EDI to get value for money for the taxpayer, not have networks within a working day. Labour has now just reversed all of this. And that's why I say it is the Labour Party at the very top, accepting certain behaviour, standards of work, but they are setting the direction. I would also say I've never seen such an ill-prepared group of people coming into government, lacking in ideas, and I will also say lacking in energy. And they've fallen back onto all of their left-wing biases, their EDIs, their whatever leftisms. And I'm afraid they are to blame, not the staff who are working for them.
I mean, there's going to be an increase, it seems anyway, in non-crime hate incidents. So hurty words. So, do we think that's a good thing? I mean, someone apparently last year, there was something like 4,000 investigations into hurty words last year by the police, which included someone being offended by something that someone had spelt out with alphabet cups at a Tesco. I mean, this is
the thing that, I mean, look, I don't use the word hurty, the phrase hurty words. I think that can be, you know, obviously on one extreme. Some of these things can be very silly. On the other extreme, they can be things that are just short of hate crimes, which you know, should potentially be logged. Look, I've said this to you before. Right. I'm yet to be convinced, and I'd be interested to hear the left-wing case for having non-crime hate incidents, because I kind of would think that either something is a crime or it isn't, and that it might be a lot of waste of police time. Probably the police love it because they're very easy to log. Having said that, they did come into effect after the Stephen Lawrence killing, because there was a fear that and there were some people who were guilty of these things, and it was an escalation. So it was important to log these things before they became crimes. And that, I think, is there was a solid principle at stake. But I agree with you; it seems to have got to extreme.
It's also the opposite of what Keir Starmer appeared to say in the wake of the Alison Pearson issue. He was pretty clear in that, which he said basically the police should be doing the job that they're paid to do. We are bang out of time for this section, though. Unfortunately, we could have carried this on, but of course, it is time now for you to scoop 50 grand in tax-free cash. It's totally tax-free. Make sure you don't miss out.
There's just 3 days left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
It's such a nice feeling.
Just go for it.
It's one text, and if I can win, anyone can win.
I was on cloud nine.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Don't miss out, as lines close on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck, everybody. Coming up to 76% of social housing is occupied by foreigners in some London boroughs. So why are Brits always at the back of the queue? Tory MP Bradley Thomas joins me live in the studio very shortly. Oh, and he's also got a genius idea that'll force migrants to repay their asylum costs. But first... I'm really looking forward to this debate, actually. So a report has revealed today exactly why so many kids got caught up in last summer's riots. And guess what? Well, they weren't motivated by the so-called far right. So with that in mind, should the children convicted over the summer disorder have their criminal records wiped clean? Retired police officer Norman Brennan is going head-to-head with anarchist Dr. Lisa Mackenzie. It's going to be fiery. Stay tuned.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lately, it's getting much better. The people getting more educated in terms of overall well-being of the skin health rather than temporary aesthetic treatments. Because most of the treatments in aesthetic, it doesn't change the texture of the skin. It just gives like volumetric result or remove the wrinkles temporarily.
So what are the most popular treatments that people are after?
According to a statistic report, first is anti-wrinkle, then dermal filler, then energy-based device. Yeah. But lately, biostimulators also became very popular. And
what do you mean by biostimulators?
Biostimulator, any substance that can change the texture of the skin, or like it will lead to postpone the aging process, or proliferate more collagen, increase the elasticity of the skin, such as polynucleotide or exosome, or different vitamins and minerals in a form of mesotherapy considered as a biostimulator.
Turkey's a particularly popular popular destination because the costs are so much lower. There have also been a lot of horror stories about what can happen when things go wrong, even people dying from post-surgery complications. What would you advise people?
Choose, as a practitioner or surgeon, very carefully and never prioritize price over quality. This is your face, after all, your body, after all. And mistakes can be reversible. It can be irreversible, and sometimes it's not like a booking restaurant or hotel. It's a sensitive matter that can affect their confidence and skin and body for life. So they need to choose very wisely. They need to search what kind of methodology that particular surgeon, they perform the treatments. Are they using any safety tools?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. OK, so welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Very, very shortly, I'm going to be setting out why basically Britain is doomed if we have the predicted population increase. But first, should the kids involved in last summer's disorder have their criminal records wiped clean? It's time now for the head-to-head. So, Children's Commissioner Dame Rachel de Souza has hit the headlines today. She's claimed that kids caught up in last summer's disorder should have their criminal records wiped clean. This report, published today, said that the involvement of teenagers in the summer disorder were primarily driven by, quote, the thrill of the moment, rather than any so-called right-wing ideology. 147 children were arrested last September after violence broke out across the country in the days and weeks following the murders of 3 children in Southport. A 12-year-old boy became the youngest person to be sentenced over the riots when he was handed a 12-month referral order back in September. An 11-year-old child was also arrested during an early morning raid in August. So tonight I'm asking, is the Children's Commissioner right that kids who were involved in the disorder should now have their criminal records wiped clean? I want to know your thoughts. Go to gbnews.com/your say. Take part in our poll on X as well. Going head-to-head on this now are the anarchist and academic Dr. Lisa McKenzie and the former police officer Norman Brennan. Great to have you both on. Thank you very much. Lisa, I'll start with you. Should they have their criminal records wiped clean, these kids?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because whenever we have civil disorder in this country, policing and the justice system changes. And it becomes very political. And justice is seldom served. If you look at the 2011 riots, this happened then, which Keir Starmer was sort of in charge of doing those 24-hour courts, and then he did the same in 2024. Just because there were children out on the street and they were smashing windows, they were doing things that on any other day they would have probably been cautioned, but because of this day, it was politicised. And I really worry about these children because they are now labelled as far right. If they were climate protesting out there and they'd got a prison sentence, they'd probably come out to decent jobs and jobs as CEOs of charities. These children will have this stuck to them for life, that they're far right.
OK. Well, Norman, just come back to that then. I suppose it's the implication, isn't it? It's not necessarily just, you know, I don't know, a drunken disorderly or something like that. It is the implication for the rest of their lives that they will be classed as far right. And to be honest with you, that's probably going to ruin a 12-year-old's life, isn't it, Norman?
Many children's lives already ruined, run up huge numbers of previous convictions. I don't know what disorder my opponent was actually watching. I watched it daily and commented on it daily. There were children, as you rightly say, as young as 11 and 12, rioting. They were looting. Some were involved in burning down buildings, cars being overturned and torched.
They
hundreds.
weren't.
Hang on a sec. Will you please let me say my bit? Thank you. Thank you. Hundreds of bricks were thrown at police officers. Hundreds of police officers were seriously injured. And the long and the short is, Patrick, is that these weren't all opportunists. Some of them are hardened criminals. Many will have many previous convictions, and they took this as an opportunity to carry out criminality. So they shouldn't have their records wiped clean. We have to set precedents and we have to set deterrents that if you behave in a certain way, you will have to face up to the consequences. And under the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act 1974, at a certain time in the future, many of their records will be wiped and they'll be given a second chance. We must have deterrents, and absolutely their records should not be wiped clean now.
All right, Lisa, go on then.
Well, what I would just say for that is, well, we are talking about children here. I'm not talking about the adults. I'm not talking about those that were arrested for setting fire to things. We are talking about children. And when we're talking about looting, we're talking about stealing. We're talking about throwing bricks. But my point here is when there is riots, it used to be called Reading the Riot Act. The terms of policing and the terms of the judicial system changes. It becomes highly political. And we've seen this time and again when there have been what we call riots, that actually the people that are involved are not treated in the same way as if they were committing those crimes when riots were not occurring. So children throwing bricks at windows on any other day, they would probably be cautioned and told off. And what I'm also talking about is this stigma. Because in the UK right now, to be called racist and to be called far right will stick to you. Yes, their convictions will be will leave will leave. But actually the stigma of being called far right, a far right thug, remember that's what our Prime Minister called them, 12-year-old, 13-year-old kids, far right thugs, they will live with that.
OK, Norman, I mean, look, I suppose when I was growing up, there was a mate of mine who nicked his dad's car, razzed it around a golf course and caused quite a bit of damage and got nicked. And then his punishment was restorative justice. So he basically went and said very sorry to the golf course, helped clean the whole thing up, and his dad gave him a clip round the ear. Is there not a difference there when it comes to some of these lads who conceivably, I'm not condoning what they did for a second, by the way, who conceivably were walking home or they're out in a park with their mate and they see something kicking off and they just kind of join in and lob a brick at a car or something? Is there not a kind of equivalence there, Norman?
No, not at all. These young children are not the children, the angelic children we knew of decades ago. These are young, hardened and often feral kids, completely and utterly out of control. And they took the Southport riots as a bonus, as an opportunity to carry that out. And one of the biggest concerns and problems here is, Patrick, is what about the discipline, respect, the morals, the boundaries that are not set by their parents? And the reason is many of these children behave the way they do is called mirror image, i.e. the same morals and same behaviour of their parents reflect on their children. These children are so hardened to crime now that 168,000 children and young men, boys, carried a knife last year. And don't forget what actually may have incited this riot was a 17-year-old boy stabbing to death 3 young girls and almost murdering 10 others. The types of angelic children that I used to deal with as a police officer has completely changed, and they're committing as serious crimes now as adults used to do decades ago.
But look, both of you, thank you very much. So we're gonna have to knock it on the head there, but it's proper debate. It's good stuff, and I think that's going to mirror what a lot of people are saying in their homes on both sides of that. So thank you very, very much. Who do you agree with? I'm intrigued to see the results of this, actually. Should the kids involved in last summer's riots have their criminal records wiped clean? Interesting. 78% of you think that they should have their criminal records wiped. 22% of you say they shouldn't. Coming up, more than 4 million Brits are facing massive council tax rises this year. Your bills could be going up by 25%. Meanwhile, your bins are going to be taken out once a month, no potholes being filled in. Are taxpayers really getting value for money? But before that, up to 76% of social housing is now occupied by foreigners in some London boroughs. So why are Brits always at the back of the queue? Tory MP Bradley Thomas joins me live next, and apparently he's got a solution to how to make asylum seekers repay their debts to Britain. Stay tuned.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Another weather system pushing into parts of Western Europe will bring some further heavy rain and strong winds as we go through tomorrow across parts of Western France, much of Spain and Portugal. It is looking wet and there will be some hill snow around too. Also some wet weather affecting southern Italy, feeding into Greece as well. That being said, as we go through later this week, most places will see something a bit drier and also some decent warmth at times too. So not a total washout of a week. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Heading into tomorrow, it's going to be turning wet and windy once again across southern coasts. Brighter elsewhere, though we can't rule out a few showers for some. The reason it's been so unsettled is because we've had low pressure largely dominating the weather, but out to the west we do have a slight ridge of high pressure building, bringing in some finer conditions later on Tuesday through into Wednesday. For tonight though, still plenty of showers feeding through, particularly across Wales and central areas of the UK, eventually dying out through the early hours of the morning, leaving plenty of clear spells. Still plenty of showers, longer spells of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland though, but with clearer skies that means temperatures should soon dip away, so likely feeling chillier compared to recent nights. Then to start off tomorrow, there should be plenty of dry and bright weather around, still those showers in the north. Just need to keep an eye on this area of rain just starting to clip in to the far southwest during the morning. A mix of dry spells and showers across much of England and Wales, some longer spells of rain around western coasts of Northern Ireland. Similar across the northeast of Scotland, some outbreaks of rain here, likely falling as snow across hills, and a good breeze moving along those northeastern coasts too. But for much of the day, many of us will see plenty of dry weather, still those showers though feeding in around coasts of Northern Ireland and northeast Scotland. And then it's later on into the afternoon we'll see outbreaks of rain start to clip southern coasts. It's going to be a very wet and windy day on offer across the Channel Islands. So the worst of the weather here, but elsewhere seeing a slightly drier day on offer, and with temperatures round about average for the time of year, though slightly milder across the south. As we head into Thursday, a ridge of high pressure means much more sunshine around, plenty of dry weather once this area of rain moves away from the far southeast. Still can't rule out a few showers, particularly once again around coasts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but for many, plenty of dry weather and lots of sunshine around too. Still some dry weather for Friday, though can't rule out some rain, particularly as we head towards the weekend, and temperatures remaining around average.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Coming up, are British taxpayers getting bang for their buck? But first, GBNews can reveal 76% of social housing in some London boroughs is occupied by foreigners. In Brent, 61% of social housing is occupied by non-UK household heads, with British nationals accounting for 39%. Westminster follows closely behind, 59.7% of social housing allocated to non-UK household heads. British nationals make up some 40%. I'm joined now by Tory MP Bradley Thomas. Bradley, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Is this a massive problem? Does this cut right to the heart of fairness that so many foreigners are living in social housing?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a massive problem, and I think people can see it in absolute plain sight. It's not just housing, it's pressure on GPs, it's pressure on infrastructure, it's the changing nature of high streets up and down the country. That's why I've been quite vocal in Parliament on calling for a crackdown on the money laundering and the people trafficking that's clearly changing the face of high streets. But the housing issue is a massive one that's been called out today. We've seen these ONS figures that say that 5 million people, migrants, are going to be settling in the UK between now and 2032. And let's face it, the government have pledged they want to build 1.5 million houses. Well, that won't even touch the size.
No, it doesn't. This did all, of course, happen initially anyway, under the Conservative watch. That's 14 years. So how do you account for that? I mean, a lot of people now will have a lingering bad taste in their mouth because this happened under you guys.
Yeah, and look, we've been quite honest in saying we got this wrong. I think the reality is our country has become really quite hooked on cheap mass migrant labour. We were sort of sold this idea that this was the salvation to our economic woes, that we'd see economic growth and prosperity on the back of it. It hasn't worked for us. Kemi Badenoch has been quite honest. In the last few weeks, she's also said that our country is not a hotel and must not be treated as such. We have got to put the British taxpayer first.
It's difficult to see where we go now, though. I mean, without kind of knocking on people's doors and really forcing the deportation issue, which is tricky if they are now here legally and all of that. But I just want to whiz us on because there's something really interesting. I know our viewers and listeners are really going to find this fascinating. So you are calling on the government to introduce a migrant repayment scheme. Now, this is similar to the student loan, I believe. Should we have a little listen to how you initially decided to articulate this? So there you go.
Why is it that the government does not explore a scheme whereby if asylum seekers are genuinely deemed to be in fear and allowed to integrate and remain within the UK, that when they become economic contributors and they are active in the workplace, that they should not repay their debt through some similar scheme?
Yeah, so expand on that a bit then. So this is an idea about how asylum seekers can essentially, repay their debt to Britain?
Yeah, so it's a really simple proposition. This was actually put to me 12 months ago by a Conservative councillor, Adam Kent, who's in my constituency. And the proposition is dead simple. It's similar to the student loan system. We know that students, they go to university, they accrue a debt. When they're working, they pay that on a sliding scale that's deducted through their wages. The idea here is that asylum seekers who come to the UK, all of the costs attributed to that, whether it's the cost of the government processing their application, whether it's the cost of them being put up in hotels whilst their claim is being processed, any cost associated with that, if their claim is successful and the government grants them right to stay in the UK, that they get a job and they start repaying their debt that they owe to the UK taxpayer. And there are two reasons behind this. One, it's about fairness to the UK taxpayer who is, in effect, footing the bill. But it's also recognition that if you choose to make the UK your home, you make a contribution. I thought it was really interesting that on Sunday, on Koonsberg, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves said, those who choose to make the UK their home should pay their taxes. Well, I think, very similarly, we could say those who choose to make the UK their home should make a contribution in recognition of the benevolence of the UK taxpayer.
Is there a risk that this could backfire, though, and they, instead of actually ever looking for work, just decide to spend a lifetime on benefits?
Well, look, I think two things have got to happen. One, the government has to explore every single option to crack down on illegal migration. Government talks about things like smashing the gangs, but they've not got a very good track record of this. We've got to put deterrents in place. People have got mixed views on whether the Rwanda scheme would or would not have worked, but they haven't proposed an alternative. We've got to make sure that we don't increase the number of pull factors, and that's why government has got to focus on processing, so process asylum claims really, really quickly whilst trying to clamp down on the number of boats and asylum seekers that are coming across. And I think it's really critical that whilst these claims are being processed, these asylum seekers are not allowed to work, because that would then increase the likelihood of getting a job as a pull factor on migration.
And well, also as well, when you do look at the latest figures that 1 in 12 people are here in London illegally, and the rest, I would suggest, then, what are they all doing? They're not contributing any money to the legal economy, are they? But look, thank you very much, Bradley. It was great to have you on the show. Much
Pleasure.
appreciated. It's Bradley Thomas there. And, you never know, you might be hearing a little bit more about that policy proposal in the coming weeks and months. But coming up at 10 p.m, Britain is on the brink of a population explosion. You heard a bit about it there. But should we actually have a one-in, one-out system? Before that, though, more than 4 million Brits now facing massive council tax rises. Your bills could go up by as much as 25%. Meanwhile, unfortunately, services are being slashed. So are we really getting value for your hard-earned money? I speak to a man dubbed the People's Chancellor next.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Feathers McGraw, Wallace and Gromit's their villain, has become an unlikely hit at UK tattoo parlours. He's menacing.
He is, yeah.
And
in fact, he doesn't speak, and he's got this glove on top of his head trying to convince us he's a chicken or something.
And that is a real tattoo that someone has decided to have there. What do you two think about tattoos? Are they express themselves? Or?
I love it. So I've basically got Dr. King.
There we go.
Me. Oh, there he goes. Nice. He's showing us.
If you can't fly, run.
Nice.
It's probably slightly more meaningful than having the villainous penguin.
Oh, come on, Trey. You get Feathers McGraw.
Maybe not. It's kind of got that kind of, when you go abroad and you're Beef or Magaluf and you Tenerife and you get a quick tattoo. It's looking like that, or like a pirate or something. It's kind of got that vibe. Not for me. However, I do get the sentimentality around it. Some people have grown up on Wallace and Gromit and they love it and it has meaning. And he is a well-written character, so I get it.
Brilliant, isn't it?
I prefer my tattoos a bit more meaningful.
Bit more, yeah. I feel like as well, there's a surge in it. Lots of people have had it, but then is it then going to become unpopular because of it? And how many people regret the tattoos? Apparently, not just 14% of people regret tattoos.
Wow.
See, I think that's where the meaningful side comes into it. I've got a couple of meaningful tattoos, and I know I will never get bored of them. Not one on my wrist, one on my ankle. They're not hidden, but I think because they mean something to me, I'll never get bored.
Yes, exactly. I think that's important. If you're gonna, a tattoo's for life, isn't it?
That's the thing.
It's got to mean something.
Have you not?
I'll be indecisive. I think I'll get something.
I want to keep on my body forever.
If I had about 6 or 7 pints and then stumbled into a tattoo parlour,
you'd come out with
that. Chaotic.
A disaster could happen. Then I walk out. Oh no, I've got this for the rest of my life.
You might become addicted.
Well, let's hope not.
Some people do.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. Coming up, the big question at 10. Do we need net zero migration? But first, more than 4 million of you hard-working Brits are facing massive council tax hikes after 8 bankrupt town halls asked for permission to raise bills by a larger amount than is normally allowed by law. Residents in Windsor and Maidenhead, the Royal Borough, are facing the biggest council tax rise in the country, adding 451 quid to the average bill. Bradford Council, which will shock nobody, is bailed out by the government last year, asked for permission to increase it by 15%. I'm now joined by entrepreneur, host of the Disruptors podcast, fan favourite, the People's Chancellor. It's Rob Moore. Rob, thank you very much. Do you think people have got a right to think, actually, we're not getting bang for our buck here, and whilst I wouldn't condone this, I don't really want to pay my council tax anymore?
Well, I mean, we're already charged so much tax anyway. But I want to take it back a step, Patrick, because Keir Starmer absolutely promised that council tax would be frozen and would not go up. And I quote, Labour will freeze council tax, not a penny more, not a penny more. That is the quote. And now it's going up. And there's supposed to be a cap of 5%. Then they make their own rules and change their own rules. And 25% increase on council tax. When some councils are saying, oh, we're going to only collect the bins for a month now and the roads are in ruin. It's a mess. It's terrible. It's wrong.
People have got a right to wonder where this money is going. You make the point, Rob. You know, we're taxed on absolutely everything. To the absolute hill. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. Is this just crippling for you? I mean, you do a lot of tweets and posts about just the sheer volume of tax that we're paid on everything.
Well, I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and say a bit of council tax increase is going to cripple me. But when you've got 20% VAT, 25% corporation, 40% plus income, 15% national insurance, business rates, pension contributions, when does it end? When does the increase in taxes end, especially when people voted Labour in on the promise that they wouldn't be putting taxes up for the people? And who are the people? And then they just keep redefining who the people are. I don't know when it ends.
I mean, Keir Starmer could reject these proposals, I suppose, or Angela Rayner or whoever is ultimately in charge of this could turn around to the councils and say no. But then I suppose they'd just go bust, wouldn't they, again?
Well, I mean, Birmingham is a bankrupt council, and that's obviously Labour. And most of them are in a real mess. Bristol, that's like stopping collecting the bins. So if they're broke, what can they do? They only have one source of revenue. I mean, some people say, oh, government spending. There is no government spending. There is only taxpayer money. They only have one source of revenue, or at least that's the only source of revenue they know.
I worry at the potential for civil disobedience. Genuinely, I really do. I worry about it because if people feel as though that they are not getting value for money at all, they look around and think, where's some money? I mean, we gave 17 million quid to Gaza again today, and some people think that's a good idea, but the point is we've just found it down the back of the couch, have we? Meanwhile, the people in the Royal Borough could have their council tax going up 25%. And they look at, well, where is all of that money going? It just feels like the social contract's broken, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, now council tax being over £5,000 a year in some areas, that's a lot of money. When you pay income tax already, which is... it's a lot of money. And I think there's two things happening, Patrick. I think you're right. I think there is some feeling of civil unrest when so much money is going overseas and so much money is funding all the, the asylum seekers. Yeah, our quality of life is going down. And did you hear, they're now talking about the population's going to explode, which means we're all going to be even poorer per head. But then on the other side of it, you've also got the mass exodus. So you've got the unrest over here and you've got everyone leaving over here. I mean, what is going on?
Talk to me about that, Rob. That's something that really does concern me. That actually those who can afford to, or maybe the best and the brightest, and maybe the younger generation who are coming up now and graduating from university, will leave because of the rate of tax we're all paying.
Well, I'm an entrepreneur and I've been an entrepreneur nearly 20 years and most of my friends are entrepreneurs. And every single conversation is, I'm leaving or I'm planning to leave, or as soon as I can leave, I will leave. That's every single conversation. And entrepreneurs are being ostracized and millionaires are being ostracized. The thing with most of the millionaires in the UK is they're not rich, affluent millionaires. You know, they drive a Toyota, their house went up over time. They're actually quite working class millionaires. So we mustn't make the enemy of them. And yeah, there's no positivity or hope. I was speaking at Eton College yesterday, And I felt so sad for the young kids. They're 14 years old asking me about starting a business. And all I've really felt like I needed to say to them was, well, most of your money's going to be taken in tax.
Yeah, I mean, it is depressing. Very quickly, because we're short on time with this, what would you do, right? So when it comes to council tax, when it comes to... Is there a solution here? Can we find a solution, a bit of positivity?
So the solution is you have to create economic growth. In order to create economic growth, you have to get the people who aren't working. Let's bring back some great apprenticeships. You know, I speak to homeless people for my content, and they all say there's no point going back to work because it's easier to be on benefits. So you've got to lift the bottom up, and you've got to attract the entrepreneurs and the tech and the money back into the UK instead of sending it away.
Yeah, look, Rob, good stuff. Thank you very much, mate. It's always a pleasure, and continue the great work, and I will see you again, hopefully, next week, if you've not left the country. Rob Moore there, and make sure you check him out online as well. Look, the Local Government Association spokesperson said many councils have faced a tough choice about whether to increase bills to bring in desperately needed funding to provide services at a time when they are acutely aware of the significant burden this could place on households. Councils need a significant change in our funding to stabilise local government finances so we can deliver the services local people want to see. I will also stress that tomorrow, Rachel Reeves is apparently doing a big speech on how she intends to deliver growth. So we will be covering that here on GB News. I'm actually going to an event just in Parliament, which is a bit of a protest about it, so we might see me pop up earlier than expected tomorrow. But maybe she will allay all of our fears. Coming up at 10 p.m, Britain is on the brink of a massive population explosion. Mass migration is going to add 5 million people in the next 10 years. I tell you how it's going to make us poorer, less healthy, potentially homeless, and if it's allowed to happen, it will cripple this great country. Stay tuned.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Heading into tomorrow, it's going to be turning wet and windy once again across southern coasts. Brighter elsewhere, though we can't rule out a few showers for some. The reason it's been so unsettled is because we've had low pressure largely dominating the weather, but out to the west we do have a slight ridge of high pressure building, bringing in some finer conditions later on Tuesday through into Wednesday. For tonight, though, still plenty of showers feeding through, particularly across Wales and central areas of the UK, eventually dying out through the early hours of the morning, leaving plenty of clear spells. Still plenty of showers, longer spells of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, though. But with clearer skies, that means temperatures should soon dip away, so likely feeling chillier compared to recent nights. Then to start off tomorrow, there should be plenty of dry and bright weather around, still those showers in the north. Just need to keep an eye on this area of rain just starting to clip in to the far southwest during the morning. A mix of dry spells and showers across much of England and Wales, some longer spells of rain around western coasts of Northern Ireland. Similar across the northeast of Scotland, some outbreaks of rain here, likely falling as snow across hills, and a good breeze moving along those northeastern coasts too. But for much of the day, many of us will see plenty of dry weather. Still those showers, though, feeding in around coasts of Northern Ireland and northeast Scotland. And then it's later on into the afternoon we'll see outbreaks of rain start to clip southern coast. It's going to be a very wet and windy day on offer across the Channel Islands. So the worst of the weather here, but elsewhere seeing a slightly drier day on offer, and with temperatures round about average for the time of year, though slightly milder across the south. As we head into Thursday, a ridge of high pressure means much more sunshine around, plenty of dry weather once this area of rain moves away from the far southeast. Still can't rule out a few showers, particularly once again around coasts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but for many, plenty of dry weather and lots of sunshine around too. Still some dry weather for Friday, though can't rule out some rain, particularly as we head towards the weekend, and temperatures remaining around average.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. for another chance to win. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, we all know illegal immigration is out of control, but now, Britain's population explosion, 5 million in the next 10 years, all fueled by mass migration. Is it time for a one-in, one-out policy? And
the former Treasury Minister, Stephen Timms, has been treated for stab wounds in an East London hospital.
a Labour MP who was stabbed by a radical Islamist broke Labour Party rules and attended an event with the Muslim Council of Britain. Does this show how desperate Labour are for the Muslim vote? Also tonight.
Sit down there! Stop around. Well, Beth is here. You can see Boris Johnson's speech when it happens around lunch.
Sky News is losing the ratings war and they might be about to go off linear TV. Oh, and the government might make people who don't even watch terrestrial television pay the BBC licence fee. What time to be alive? Oh, and disgraced referee David Coote does a Philip Schofield and comes out as gay after a massive scandal, and Hollywood celebrities cannot stop embarrassing themselves.
I just wanted to say that I feel sorry. How many people are getting attacked?
I don't think we arrested any families. We've arrested public safety threats and national security threats, bottom line.
On my panel tonight, former Tory Minister for Common Sense Esther McVey, GB News presenter Alex Armstrong and journalist Jonathan Liss. Oh, and why is this roly-poly rapper in the news?
I can fit in this car.
No, believe me, you can.
Yes, I can.
Believe me. So, I'm sorry.
She can't fit in the car. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Is it time for net zero immigration? Next.
Very good evening to you. It's just after 10 o'clock. The top story tonight, the UK's population is set to soar by nearly 5 million people over the next decade, driven almost entirely by net migration, according to new figures from the Office for National Statistics. That means that by the middle of 2032, the UK population is expected to hit 72.5 million people, sparking concerns over pressure on resources and services. The Conservatives are calling for a legal cap on visas, but Downing Street has rejected the idea, insisting the government's policies will tackle the issue more effectively. The driver of a car that crashed into a school tea party, killing 2 8-year-old girls, has been rearrested today on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Claire Fremantle was previously told she wouldn't face charges after suffering an epileptic seizure that caused that crash in Wimbledon. The Met Police has reopened its investigation following concerns from the families of Nuria Sajjad and Selina Lau. Their parents say it's vital the investigation continues in pursuit of truth and the full facts. Sir Keir Starmer is facing pressure from within Labour to back compensation for women hit by state pension age changes. It follows a Commons vote where MPs backed a bill calling for payouts of almost £3,000 each, despite the government ruling out compensation. The SNP Stephen Flynn says that it should be a defining issue for Parliament, urging ministers to do the right thing. 10 Labour MPs supported that proposal despite their party's leadership staying silent. The bill is set to return for further debate on the 7th of March. Plans to jail water bosses who block investigations are one step closer to becoming law. MPs have backed the water bill without opposition, sending it to the Lords for final approval. It gives regulators the power to strip executives of bonuses and possibly send them to prison for up to 2 years if they obstruct investigations. The Environment Secretary Steve Reid has said bill payers are rightly angry and has vowed to clean up the mess once and for all. Cardiff University has confirmed plans to cut 400 full-time jobs as it battles a £30 million budget shortfall. Those cuts could also lead to school closures and subjects merging, with nursing, music and modern languages among the areas at risk. The University and College Union has slammed the proposals as cruel and unnecessary, pledging to fight any compulsory redundancies. But the Vice-Chancellor, Wendy Lana, has said the university must make difficult decisions to adapt to rising costs and falling numbers of international students. The UK has pledged an extra £17 million in humanitarian aid to Gaza, with a focus on food, water and healthcare. The Development Minister made the announcement in the House of Commons earlier and confirmed £2 million will go towards restoring vital infrastructure. That comes as a fragile ceasefire in Gaza enters its second week. Thousands of civilians are now returning to the north of the territory. Annalise Dodds warned that Israel's ban on UN aid risks stalling the progress made, though, and is calling for unrestricted access for humanitarian agencies. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I will be back with you in around an hour's time. Now, though, it's back over to Patrick.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. Great Britain is officially full. Today, new population growth predictions landed, and it will be game over for the UK if it's allowed to happen. We now have a higher population than France. France is more than double the size of us. The UK population is set to rise by just under 5 million people in the next 10 years. Slightly less than 10 years, actually. There will be 72.5 million people crammed into our little island by mid-2032. And all of that will be down to mass immigration. How do we know? Well, the projected difference between domestic births and deaths is projected to be 0. So it's all immigrants. And that number will actually be higher. Mark my words, it will be higher, because every year we're told a figure for net migration, and then every year they revise it upwards. We had a net migration of 1 million people last year alone, didn't we? Labour have said that they want to build a load of houses.
We want homes on these sites within the first term of a Labour government. But these new large settlements must be built in the right place in partnership with local people. This is why an expert independent task force will be set up to help choose the right sites, and a list of projects will be announced within the first 12 months of government, so that we can start building the towns of the future within months and not decades.
1.5 million homes in 5 years. Let's say they double that to 3 million. That is still 2 million short of the number of people set to enter Britain in that time period. Let that sink in. So mass immigration will make us homeless or living in squalor. And you won't get social housing. Oh no, in parts of the UK, about 61% of social housing is occupied by non-Brits. Then we've got the NHS. There are currently 7.5 million people on an NHS waiting list. We can't get GP appointments. How much more money in taxes will you have to pay so millions of foreigners can clog up our NHS? Did you know that the Burj Khalifa, the world's largest building, cost the equivalent of 3 days and 11 hours of NHS spending to build that thing? So mass immigration will make us less healthy and quite possibly kill people. What about your taxes? Councils are looking at hiking council tax by 25% in some areas, and that's now. Never mind, with 5 million more people here. What about your other taxes? 55% of households in Britain already claim more in benefits than they pay in tax. Shall we have a little look at some of the demographics, shall we? According to the latest census, there is an economic inactivity rate of 48% amongst Arabs, 40.8% amongst Pakistanis. And what countries do we think these millions of migrants will mostly be coming from? Mass migration will make us poorer. Schools. Mass immigration will mean children get a worse education. Dentists. Currently, prisoners get better dental care than the average member of the public. Look at this massive queue outside a dentist practice in Bristol here. You just tell me one of the things that stands out for you in all of that. Yeah, OK. Buckle up for much more of that, everybody. Mass immigration. It'll rot our teeth. And what about culture? Well, the East End's traditional pie and mash shops are closing. Tower Hamlets is now just 22% white British. But it's more than just the pie and mash shops, isn't it? 2/3 of rapes and sexual assaults in London are believed to have been committed by somebody who wasn't born in the UK. Let me put it this way, all right? If you went to Tokyo and you walked around and the majority of people that you saw there were visibly not Japanese, wouldn't you think that was a bit weird? And we are the Western capital for Sharia courts as well. While we're at it, we've got 85 of them. British culture and British way of life will be a thing of the past. And that's before I've mentioned that hotels full of illegal migrants are popping up in every town and city. They all, of course, get great healthcare, by the way. In fact, in Oxfordshire, asylum seekers get taxpayer-funded driving lessons. At every single opportunity, you, the British public, have voted to bring down immigration. Every single time, you have been lied to. The reality is this: at the current rate, future generations will be homeless, poor, unhealthy, uneducated, and will have more of an allegiance to a foreign land. What our politicians are doing to us is nothing short of treason. Let's get the thoughts from my panel this evening. Conservative MP Esther McVeigh, GB News presenter Alex Armstrong, and we've also, of course, got the wonderful journalist Jonathan Liss. Now, Esther, I'll put to you those population growth numbers there. If that's allowed to happen, Britain's finished, isn't it?
Well, I would be very strict on this. You're talking one in, one out. I'd be doing on legal migration, which we can be in charge of. I'd be looking for a moratorium until we can build the houses you need, get the hospitals you need, whatever, get the integration you need, get the culture. So I would be doing a moratorium on that.
So and on the illegal, stop immigration.
I would have it for a period of time whilst we look at what we can cope with, whilst we look at assimilation. Yes, I would. And I think I'd call it an emergency. Call other things emergency. I'd say we need to do that
like because Donald Trump's Muslim ban, figure out what the hell's going on.
Because actually, to set a numerical target actually would probably be far more difficult to hit. Because other people would have exceptions, exemptions, other family members, reasons people could come in. So if you said, for a period of time, this is what we'll do.
All right, so we've got the projections. Those projections are absolutely stark. OK, so what would you do about it? Net zero migration? Do an Esther McVeigh moratorium?
I think, actually, we have to go further because I think there's already too many people here. We can't build enough homes. The hospitals are crowded. As you saw, dentists are full up. We actually need to have negative migration for a little while the country grows and copes and builds for the people that are already here, let alone worrying about bringing more people. Because net immigration, it also means that you still... Well, I think we do need to have some sort of deportation for illegal people living in the country, for foreign criminals living in our country. Yes, I do. But I also think we need to let some people leave. Jonathan, we need to let some people leave here. I was born and bred in London. I can't afford a home. There's plenty of people who can't afford to buy a home. There are not enough jobs.
Which legal migrants do you want to see gone?
Illegal migrants.
I said which legal migrants?
I didn't say I want to see legal migrants gone, but people leave the country all the time. I said we don't always need to replace everybody that leaves. As Patrick says, plenty of them are unemployed, and we don't need to be filling up the country with more unemployed people. What we need is for the country to recover from the mass immigration experiment that the last successive 30 years of governments have done and actually catch up. We're talking about building houses and homes and hospitals equivalent to 9 times of Manchester, Birmingham. This is insane. We cannot continue. We need a break.
What's your reaction, Jonathan, to those population growth predictions there?
I think that they look completely normal. And you know, what was really...
Where does it end?
We're speechless, completely
Come on.
normal. No, they're not.
Go on, why
it is too much to cope with.
It's your opinion, Esther. I think
I'd say most of the public.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not expecting to find a lot of fans on this channel, for sure, but and that doesn't mean that my position is not entirely right. And that you have... well, the thing that was most striking to me is that you have basically a 0-0 deaths and births. And actually, you might find you have a falling birth rate. And you have countries like, you mentioned Japan. I'm not entirely sure what you meant by that comment, by the way, about people looking visibly non-Japanese. I don't know what it means to look visibly British, but we'll park that to one side. But countries like Japan, they have a stagnant economy, and they actually need immigration, and a lot of countries need immigration. And, you know, you can make very valid arguments in this country about needing to train people to be doctors and to sort of man our public services. I completely get that. But it's not either or. We need immigration.
Let's talk about economy for a second, because we never talk about GDP per capita. We always talk about GDP. GDP per capita is down. People are as poor or as wealthy as they were, what, in 2007? Is that the kind of country we want? Do you want to see that continue to go? I'm not. No, it's not just. No. It's per capita. We are poorer per capita. It's not just the economy has grown since then, but people in general can't get jobs. They can't get homes. We're having less children because we can't have the sustainable households.
People aren't building. The governments haven't been building homes.
But you're not going to build enough anyway to say this is what you're calling normal.
The other point, Patrick, is that you're making was that it seemed to be presupposing that you'd only have one migrant per house. And actually, one of the reasons that legal migration figures are so high and have been so high under your government, Esther, is that you have people bringing their dependents, and the last government stopped that, and now we have an even bigger crisis in the care sector, for example, because people aren't coming at all because they're not allowed to bring their dependents anymore.
To be fair, what Rishi did there, stopping particularly student dependents,
now we're seeing universities having to ditch staff because they can't support themselves anymore.
But they should never have been selling migration.
University is one of the biggest sectors in the country.
No, well, it shouldn't be, because it was like a giant Ponzi scheme. It was selling migration rather than education, and that's what they were selling to this country. So actually, Rishi was right, and that, which would have stopped in January, you'll see those figures come down straight away. But separating out what we do with legal migration, what we're in charge, and then illegal migration is where they should be. And I agree with Rupert Lowe, who would have said, you know, detainment and then deport. But what the Conservative brought in was the Rwanda scheme, because you've got to send them to a third country. Both Labour and Reform didn't want the third country. That is the solution.
I mean, we also could do what Donald Trump is doing and say, hey, by the way, if you don't take them back, we're going to put tariffs on you. We're going to revoke visas. Was it Douglas Carswell? Douglas Carswell suggested, and it's a great suggestion, said if the Pakistani government don't want to take back Pakistani illegal immigrants and foreign criminals, then let's revoke visas.
Jonathan, just on the birth rate, do you not think that maybe people aren't having kids because people are getting into their mid-30s and they haven't got anywhere to live, they can't afford a house, they feel as though their wages are being artificially driven down?
And there's no childcare. Life is rubbish for people, absolutely. And whose fault is that? So is it the government that's been in office for 6 months, or is it the government that was in office for 14 years before that?
Do you think 5 million more people is going to make that better or worse, Jonathan?
I think that it really depends on who those people are and
let's have a look at
what the economy is looking like generally. Look, Patrick, you know, I presume you are greatly in support of Brexit, which means that the government is now completely in charge of who can come into this country.
Yeah,
and the government. The governments can put all and have sort of set up a point scheme, and so we need these particular skills, and we actually have a lot of sectors that desperately need people to come from all parts of the world. People are not coming here. Legal migrants are not coming here to be economically inactive. That's not how it works.
No, you
but
cannot.
It is how it works. We showed you a stat. About 40% of people in some communities
people who are coming here are not coming here to be able to fend off the state.
I don't agree with that at all. You can't say, oh, we don't want to do those jobs and we'll ship people in from other sides of the world. It's brain drain for them. It's completely wrong. We have to do those jobs. You can't pick and choose. We all need to get our shoulder to the wheel.
I said that people need to be doing jobs as well. This is not either or.
The biggest issue, and I guess the biggest expenditure for everybody, is a house and is a mortgage. And when millions more people are coming in every day, and it's a supply and demand situation, and the demand is much bigger than the supply cannot go above a certain amount, and that's why you need immigration figures going down.
On top of that, Esther, we just saw the Labour government killed the Tories' plan to have have British citizens put first at the front of the queue for social housing, which is exactly...
That's not true.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Alex.
Angela Rayner killed that policy.
This is not non-British people. The figure that you were quoting earlier, about 76%, that is simply people who are not born here. That's people who became British citizens maybe 25 years ago. Boris Johnson...
No, that's not what I was talking about. Jonathan, that wasn't what I was discussing. Jonathan, I was saying there was a policy that Rishi Sunak's government wanted to bring in which would have put British citizens at the top of the social housing ladder because they are paid into the system and deserve it, and illegals or foreigners at the bottom, which is where it should be, right? Well, Angela Rayner killed that.
Just quickly on this, because I'd like to just get in on this one, because I think that there's the real serious risk of massive civil unrest if this goes ahead, because people have to have voted for, well, by the time this comes into force, if these population predictions are true, for like the best part of 25, 30 years, consistently for lower immigration. And they would have found themselves consistently being lied to and deceived on that. And I think that could lead to a bit of trouble, really, with ordinary British citizens. I mean, is it not really just in any government's interest to bring that down? Are you worried about the idea now that, you know, you're obviously an MP yourself, that people will just, like, not believe what MPs say when it comes to...
I've always been probably somebody who's slightly more vocal on keeping immigration levels down. And I think for a long period of time, people didn't want to talk about it, because should you talk about it, people say, oh, you are racist.
We've been talked about nothing else for 30 years.
No. And now it's more at a crisis point. And people are now talking about it, and probably in a slightly more inflamed way, because it is now more of a critical sort of crisis point. So we do need to have immigration down, and as I said, I'd look at it as a moratorium for the legal migration. It is important that we do that, because you are right, lots of people are concerned about schooling, about going to the doctors, getting to the dentist, about buying a house, having a job, and they're saying my standard of living is much more reduced, and I don't want that.
And we're the most tolerant country on earth. I guarantee you, no other country in Western Europe, Jonathan, would have put up with what we've put up with for the last 10 or 20
years. How many Syrian refugees did Germany let in?
Well, Germany's suffering the consequences of that, Jonathan. Seriously suffering the consequences.
It's not true that we've done in other countries. It's just simply not true. And can I just put this one to Esther? We have talked about migration week in, week out for decades. It's just not true that we can't have a conversation about migration. We are having it all the time.
No, we are now.
No, we were before as well.
We're being ignored. I think that's the problem. We talk about it, we vote against it, and nobody listens. I think the British public are at wit's end with being ignored on this issue.
Well, we will see what happens going forward, won't we? But, of course, it's time now for your chance to win 50 grand in completely tax-free cash. Make sure you don't miss out.
There's just 3 days left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
It's such a nice feeling.
Just go for it.
It's one text, and if I can win, anyone can win.
I was on cloud nine.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Don't miss out, as lines close on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck, everyone. I'll bring you all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages hot off the press. Oh, and why is this roly-poly rapper in the news?
I can fit in this car.
But believe me, you can.
Yes, I can.
Believe me. So, I'm sorry.
But first, the Labour minister's under fire tonight after he broke government rules to attend a Muslim Council of Britain event. He was, by the way, previously stabbed by an Islamist. Does it show how far Labour will go to appease the Muslim vote? Stay tuned.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Lisa, you got in touch with me and you flagged this survey because you were concerned as a parent that your child had been given this to fill out.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter came home from school, she was very confused. She was asking why somebody would want to hurt themselves if they were feeling sad or worried about something. So that led to a conversation that we had, and I actually phoned the school and asked them to send me the survey, which with a lot of pushing, they eventually did send me the survey. And when I read through it, I was just completely shocked at the content. The survey says when I'm feeling worried that maybe I should try cutting or harming myself, because it's in the survey, so that must be an option. I've tried everything else, so why not try this?
It is astonishing that some of these are young children who are perhaps being introduced to these, these abuses for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of 17 different types of drugs, some of which I've actually never heard of myself. I mean, the wording on here is, have you ever got high from taking drugs? I mean...
And we know that some of these behaviours, self-harm, gender dysphoria, taking drugs, are psychologically contagious. Children do them because they see other children do them, or they find out about them from the internet or from surveys like this. So the idea that this is just information gathering and won't go any further than that is ridiculous. There was a similar survey in Scotland, I think, about 3 years ago, where children the same age, 11, 12, 13, were asked about their sex lives. How many times have you had sex in the last year? How did you have sex? Did you use contraception? Totally normalising underage sex. So the idea that children are just mini adults and we can confront them with all the same kind of ideas and dilemmas that adults have to face is just ridiculous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Coming up, I'll bring you the first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. There is an absolutely sensational story on there about a former Strictly contender who's been forced to just the worst apology ever. Just stay tuned for that. But first, a Labour minister is under fire tonight after he flouted Westminster rules and attended a Muslim Council of Britain event, despite a government pledge not to restore ties with the UK's biggest Muslim group. Minister for Social Security and Disability, Sir Stephen Timms, who was actually previously stabbed at a constituency surgery by a woman who was inspired by Al-Qaeda, attended the group's annual leadership dinner last week. Now, the previous Tory government had a non-engagement policy with the group over extremism concerns, which the Muslim Council of Britain have long denied, by the way. The current government has continued that policy. So, in Sir Stephen Timms' London constituency of East Ham, 50% of the population are Muslim, compared to 28% who are Christian. I'm joined now by former Tory MP Mike Freer. Mike, thank you very, very much. Does this maybe show how desperate Labour are for the Muslim vote?
I think it's a worrying, two things. One is worrying that a serving minister is able to flout the collective responsibility of this non-engagement policy, which actually was started under the Blair years. Hazel Blair was the Secretary of State of Local Government who first started the non-engagement policy under the Tony Blair years, and that was continued under the then subsequent Conservative governments because of the long-held concerns that the MCB had some extreme views and certainly had failed to condemn acts of violence. And I think that Stephen is oddly quite a thoughtful man. He's actually a very nice individual. And of course, he has some personal experience, having been stabbed by someone who'd been radicalised. So it's slightly understandable that he'd want to engage with the Muslim community. But on the other hand, it's slightly baffling, considering what he went through, that he would engage with an organisation
on that, Mike,
which is thought to be difficult.
Yeah, there's an added reason, apart from the fact that we just like you here, that we wanted to get you on, which is that you, of course, have had some experiences yourself. I mean, you quite famously used to have to wear a stab vest when you were out and about in your former constituency of Golders Green, wasn't it? So you have had some experience of threats from more hardline radical Islamist people. Does that make it more baffling to you that a serving Labour MP who's been stabbed by an al-Qaeda-inspired terrorist would then go and break party ranks and go and engage with the Muslim Council of Britain? Of course, not to say that they are anything like al-Qaeda themselves, but you get my drift.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would expect Stephen to engage with his local communities. That would be entirely acceptable as the local MP, and given that he would want to reach out to his constituents of all faiths. It is somewhat baffling to reach out to an organisation which has, so we say, something of a checkered past, and which is currently on a non-engagement list as government policy. So that's the bit that's baffling. Now, whether he had permission from the whips, that we don't know. But I do think it raises some serious questions as why he would engage with an organisation that has yet been completely cleared and is yet to be seen to be suitable for engagement with the government.
Well, and on that, I believe that the Muslim Council of Britain had a role to play when it came to an organisation called the MuslimVote.co.uk, which was very influential at the last election, which endorsed a variety of different candidates, some independent, some Labour, for their seat, based fundamentally, really, around their views on the issue of Palestine. Do you wonder whether or not that has posed a bit of political pressure here on Stephen Timms, who represents the London constituency of East Ham, which has a 50% Muslim population?
Well, I don't think it's just Stephen. I think if you look at the number of Labour MPs which have a large Muslim vote, and we've managed to avoid in the UK identity politics. You know, we broadly, all of our various communities vote based on the candidates and the issues and the main parties. We've rarely seen single issue parties based on if you like, a religious element. And so that's a worrying trend. And clearly we saw Labour MPs unseated. We saw Labour MPs seriously harassed and threatened. And so I suspect that the Labour Party are worried about, A, the broader trend, but also some specific seats where if they are turned against by a religious group, they will lose those seats. And so I've no doubt that this is a worry for them.
Well, we also saw Keir Starmer being quite hard line when it came to removing the whip of some of his MPs when they voted against him on the issue of the two-child benefit cap. So now you see Stephen Timms, who, at face value, has gone against the advice of the government and the line from the government, which is that we do not engage with the Muslim Council of Britain. He appears to have gone against that. So is it not only fair on those MPs who voted against Starmer on the two-child benefit cap that Stephen Timms loses the whip?
Yeah, so unless he was given specific permission from the whip's office, which we don't know, I would expect him, he's broken collective responsibility. So you would normally expect a minister to be sacked if you have broken collective responsibility, broken government policy without permission or without, you know, a good cause, which I can't see one would be. Whether you then withdraw the whip, if you just removed him as being a minister, that's quite significant punishment. But beyond that, I think losing the role of being a minister would be the usual sanction for a minister stepping out of line and breaking his own government's policy.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. It is always a pleasure to catch up with you and great to see you again. And it's Mike Freer, there's the former Tory MP. Look, again, as Mike repeatedly stressed there, we don't know 100% whether or not Stephen Timms was given some kind of special dispensation. All I will say is, at face value, and I'm sure most people watching this and listening to it think it as well, if you happen to have been stabbed by a jihadi, it might seem a little bit odd to break ranks with the government advice about not meeting an organisation that happens to be called the Muslim Council of Britain. I'll stress again, they are not jihadis, and go and meet them. It just seems a little bit odd. Maybe you're desperate for the vote of a certain demographic, but a spokesperson for the Muslim Council of Britain said, "We remain committed to building bridges and contributing constructively to the national conversation, regardless of government engagement." It said it was focused on uniting, empowering and serving communities with an unwavering commitment to fostering a cohesive and inclusive society. GB News did contact Sir Stephen Timms and the Muslim Engagement and Development Group for comment. We haven't, unfortunately, heard back from either. I'll bring you the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Some breaking news tonight. Could the government be about to make you pay for a TV licence, even if you don't watch terrestrial television, just to fund the BBC? Let them go bust. Oh, and what's going on here? Makes you proud to be British. Stay tuned.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Another weather system pushing into parts of Western Europe will bring some further heavy rain and strong winds as we go through tomorrow across parts of Western France, much of Spain and Portugal. It is looking wet and there will be some hill snow around too. Also some wet weather affecting southern Italy, feeding into Greece as well. That being said, as we go through later this week, most places will see something a bit drier and also some decent warmth at times too. So not a total washout of a week. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Heading into tomorrow, it's going to be turning wet and windy once again across southern coasts. Brighter elsewhere, though we can't rule out a few showers for some. The reason it's been so unsettled is because we've had low pressure largely dominating the weather, but out to the west we do have a slight ridge of high pressure building, bringing in some finer conditions later on Tuesday through into Wednesday. For tonight, though, still plenty of showers feeding through, particularly across Wales and central areas of the UK, eventually dying out through the early hours of the morning, leaving plenty of clear spells. Still plenty of showers, longer spells of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland though, but with clearer skies that means temperatures should soon dip away, so likely feeling chillier compared to recent nights. Then to start off tomorrow, there should be plenty of dry and bright weather around, still those showers in the north. Just need to keep an eye on this area of rain just starting to clip in to the far southwest during the morning. A mix of dry spells and showers across much of England and Wales, some longer spells of rain around western coasts of Northern Ireland. Similar across the northeast of Scotland, some outbreaks of rain here, likely falling as snow across hills, and a good breeze moving along those northeastern coasts too. But for much of the day, many of us will see plenty of dry weather, still those showers though feeding in around coasts of Northern Ireland and northeast Scotland. And then it's later on into the afternoon we'll see outbreaks of rain start to clip southern coast. It's going to be a very wet and windy day on offer across the Channel Islands. So the worst of the weather here, but elsewhere seeing a slightly drier day on offer, and with temperatures round about average for the time of year, though slightly milder across the south. As we head into Thursday, a ridge of high pressure means much more sunshine around, plenty of dry weather once this area of rain moves away from the far southeast. Still can't rule out a few showers, particularly once again around coasts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but for many, plenty of dry weather and lots of sunshine around too. Still some dry weather for Friday, though can't rule out some rain, particularly as we head towards the weekend, and temperatures remaining around average.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome along, everybody. It's time for the first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, and we go in With the Daily Mail, tear down barriers to growth you created. Labour was last night urged to stop punishing businesses. We're going to be covering whatever the Chancellor's announcement is tomorrow here on GB News, so look forward to that. The Guardian, Reeves pledges to create Europe's Silicon Valley. In push for growth, Rachel Reeves will reveal plans to create more jobs. Apparently the Silicon Valley is going to be between Oxford and Cambridge. So there we go. Or I thought it was just about Oxford Brooks, but anyway. And then we've got the iPaper. Thank you, Jonathan. Then we've got the iPaper. Electric vehicle charging boost as Reeves drives for UK growth. The Chancellor's going to announce £55 million investment to supply 30,000 extra electric vehicle curbside charging points. Oh yeah, our gal's going. In a major speech, Rachel Reeves will attempt to shake off post-budget concerns. Look, there's a lot of Rachel Reeves here. The Daily Telegraph, Reeves, I will fight for growth. Chancellor's backing for airport expansions. But he faces opposition from Cabinet and MPs, most notably Ed Miliband, of course, who's going to be, who's going to win the battle of Miliband versus Reeves? We'll see where we... Now, The Sun have got a story that I will touch on a bit later. Win, I'm so sorry. Now... This is just a ridiculous story. The Tenors quotes time out after a Strictly choice. He made what people regard as a sexist joke, OK? And now, can I just read out his apology? His apology is, I am deeply sorry for the pain my inappropriate actions
so ridiculous
have caused and plan to take time for self-reflection. Guys, look, sorry about it. We might as well just do this now, right? So this guy made a joke about a sexual act. A sexual
It's just a way
act.
of eating meat.
OK. and it was a joke, right? It was a joke. And now they've basically, they won't say this, but they've basically sacked him, right? And he's apologising for causing pain to people. What is going on?
It's complete... I mean, listen, I heard what the joke is, and it's ridiculous. This is the sort of jokes that people tell to their friends and their family... Well, no, it's not their family, but to tell these jokes around the dinner table or the pub, you know? This is banter. This is British humour, and we've just got to... I get there's lots of sensitivities because people have been fired recently for lots of different things, and Strictly's under a lot of pressure, but, I mean, come on, this is just one step too far, isn't it?
I mean, it was a joke about a sexual act. So a lady was trying to squeeze through the middle of a couple of people, and he was like, well, da-da-da. Anyway, and as Jonathan kindly said, it's a way of cooking meat. And he made a little joke. This guy might never work again now.
Oh, come on, he's always got something to compare with, surely.
He won't.
OK, so the show, I don't know if it's doing good or not, it's got a bit of advertising space on the back of it. It does seem that he actually has been thrown under the bus. So it might have been crude, he might have been vulgar, etc. Yeah. But you're all adults. But it does look as if it's destroyed his career. He now could lose his adverts as well as go. And lose. And do you think people will start saying, "Do I really want to go on this show?"
Yeah. I think we all
thought of a little smutty comment could ruin my career.
Also, it does also tie in.
What a nonsense!
It ties in perfectly with what the Sun's front page was yesterday, and what is their top story. David Coote, the disgraced referee, who was filmed. What appeared to be snorting some powder, OK, and also moaning about Liverpool fans and all of this stuff, right? So he's lost his job. There was a scandal there, and he says, as I said, he's kind of done a Schofield.
He has absolutely done a Schofield.
He's come out on the front page of the Sun crying and saying, well, actually, I'm gay. Now, I don't know if that might be quite offensive to gay people.
I think the reality is that it's not a get out for you doing something wrong. It's like, I'm gay. What a distraction. Well, no, but that's what he's doing. It's a cover-up, isn't it? It's like, I'm gay. Let's forget about what I did. Forget about the drugs. Forget about the insulting referees. I'm gay.
I mean,
come on.
I mean, being gay for some people can be quite stressful. Not for us, obviously.
But Jonathan, it's the reality is that he is done exactly what Philip Schofield. Patrick's nailed it. Philip Schofield has said.
Schofield was not accused of doing anything.
No. I said scandal. I said a scandal.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when the scandal was looking to break, what does the first thing he did? Is I'm gay, by the way, everybody. Distraction. Take away from the problem.
Years before, the better analogy.
And he's coming back on the same. Look, on the same front page, it says here: Coote saved by VAR. Sacks ref could return as a coach when this guy for selling a joke is being sacked.
I'll tell you a better analogy, which was Kevin Spacey. When Kevin Spacey was accused of sexual assault, now this was offensive. He said, actually, it's time for me to tell you all I'm gay. Now that was very offensive to gay people because that looks that he was was using his sexuality to kind of excuse things he'd done and to sort of distract people from that. So that's sort of that.
I don't know. I mean, I saw this and I just thought, what's the answer? He's after a bit of pity. So he's kind of being derided by football fans. Obviously, his career's over, right, for doing what he did. So that's happened. There's no coming back from that. Then to appear on the Sun, floods of tears, I was wrestling with my sexuality. Well, hang on a minute. What you were accused of doing had nothing to do with you being gay. It was...
Whoever is his PR manager, I have to say, I think it's absolutely nothing to do with anything. You either take it on the chin what you did wrong, but I think to come out with another story, is it a distraction story? I don't get it.
I don't get it.
So I kind of think he's...
Yeah.
I think the public have had enough of this kind of stuff. Honestly, seriously, what's it going to say? One day I'm going to do something really bad and I'm just going to press the button and you see me on the front of the Sun going, right, I'm gay. All right, I'm really sorry.
You're Emily's going to be watching on the other side. Emily's going to be going,
what? Unspeakable crime. I'm just going to be sorry, you know what it is. Just everyone feel sorry for me, please.
Does Emily know that?
She's about... Depends. She's about to find out. Anyway, right, moving on.
I always have my suspicions.
Police, a lot of people have. Anyway, moving on. Police in Sheffield were involved in a high-speed chase with a shoplifter who evaded them in a wheelchair. Brilliant. I mean, so she was apparently accused of stealing high-value items, and the other aspect of this story that's shocking is she was let off. So after all that, she just let her off.
Apparently, they had a helicopter as well. Someone actually said they had a helicopter. I'm not joking. Someone said, I live near the area and there's a helicopter flying overhead.
So did none of these police get out of one of them and run after and stop? I mean, did they not think of that? Are those two policemen now going to come out to apologise and then...
See him on the front.
It's like a dog. What does the dog do when it catches up with... What does the dog do when it catches up with the man? Like the police car is not going to...
Stop it. It was a rolling... It wasn't even electric.
I know.
It was doing
Anyway, rumour has it she's still flooring it down the M1. There we are. Coming up, the rest of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Well, is it bad news for Sky and the BBC? Oh, well, never mind.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
That's football.
Well,
it's the hope that kills you.
It does. It gives you highs, it gives you lows. I mean, if you're an Everton fan at the moment, you probably had far too many lows. But as you know, I'm a Nottingham Forest fan.
Well, you must be having a huge high.
But you had one of the greatest footballers ever to grace the game, Mike, and that was Dixie Dean.
Yeah, absolutely. William Ralph Dean. Didn't like being called Dixie, but that was his nickname. And he was born in 1907. He was my grandfather's best mate. I'm an Everton shareholder. I've been, attached to the club all my life, and so was my father, so was my grandfather, our greatest ever player.
So back in the day when players like Dixie Dean were playing football for big crowds in, a proper...
72,000.
Yeah, a proper working class sport back in the day, weren't it, football? Not like it is today. You've got to be pretty wealthy to afford a ticket.
Even in the 70s, right, and I've seen some, I do like looking back on the football that I watched as a kid. Even in the 70s now, I've seen pictures of the turnstiles, as we used to call them, with a sign at the top, 5 shillings for the Eastern Terrace. 5 shillings. Yeah. Last time I turned down a ticket to go to a football match was Arsenal, who wanted me to pay £830 for a seat in an executive lounge. And though I could have afforded it, because I've worked all my life like you, I just thought at that point, that's ridiculous.
Well, you should have told him you were Keir Starmer's security man. You'd have probably got him for nothing.
Well, that's a good idea. Yeah.
But you go back to the the 1930s and 1940s, even the 1960s and 70s. The footballers would walk to the ground and play a game, and then walk back and go for a few beers in the pub.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. So we've got some more front pages for you here. The Times, I think we're going with, are we? Yes, we are. PM invokes Thatcher in promise to cut red tape. He says he's going to clear regulatory weeds for business. Let's go to the Metro. Abramovich, super yachts and a tax-avoiding scandal. Leaked emails reveal Cyprus leasing Dodge saved ex-Chelsea chief millions. I mean, Cyprus is just Russia on sea, basically, although Russia has got a coast, so anyway. Daily Express. King said no to Agincourt. So the King vetoed a new Navy submarine being called HMS Agincourt because he didn't want to upset the French. Right? Some people are pointing out that maybe that is part of the duty of any king, is to just upset the French a little bit. Now, we're a bit pressed for time, so I want to rattle on with this. So Netflix users face being forced to pay the TV licence fee even if they don't watch the BBC, even if they don't watch terrestrial telly. This is under plans being explored by officials. So one option for the future funding of the BBC is to make households who only use streaming services pay the annual charge. It's mad. Bloomberg said that the plan has been discussed by the Prime Minister's office, as well as the Treasury. Sky News has also announced that they are going to begin the transition of shifting their content online as they move away from traditional TV. What a sad loss. That would, of course, leave just us. Let's have it. Anyway, Esther, so it's on.
And Channel 4.
It's on.
Got
right,
Channel 4 as well.
We could cut away from this news to do a show called The Boy with a Bum for a Face or something. Ridiculous. Channel 4
good point. That sounds quite entertaining.
Esther, when it comes to particularly paying the BBC license, why should people who only watch Netflix and Amazon Prime or whatever have to pay a tax that goes towards the BBC?
Well, they shouldn't, should they? The BBC's licence fee, whatever, it started in 1946, it's completely out of date. It should be a subscription model. You can't now, because people aren't watching them because the programmes aren't good enough and they've chosen to go elsewhere and they're paying for a subscription to them. You can't now do a Netflix tax because it's doing really well and what it's going to do is subsidise the station that isn't doing very well. No, they're going to have to rethink this and it's subscriptions. They've got to get... I tell you what, if they do it, it's bad news for the BBC because the amount of resentment that would build towards the BBC and it'd drive everyone here.
Yeah, I'm slightly more worried that they're actually going to bake it into taxes, which is what they initially said. I mean, they've ruled it out, I think. Lisa Nandy ruled it out. But you never know with this government. There's a lot of U-turns, screeching U-turns in this government.
And they're desperate at the moment.
And that's the thing. You just let people pay for it who want to watch it. They have got some good shows. The Traitors is a good show. I watched that. I thought that was very entertaining.
At the same time as this show, mate.
Well, yeah. I watch it on catch-up. Let me just...
watch it. You know what? That makes you... You're a traitor.
I watch it on catch-up at 11 o'clock, all right? Just for the record. All right,
yeah. Go on, so look, can there possibly be a case for funding the BBC by clawing money off people who not even don't watch the Beeb, don't watch telly?
Well, how would that work? I mean, you've got to have a people. If you don't have a TV, then fair enough.
What it's going to be is, I'm assuming,
tax people
is that it would literally just be if you own a television set. It's basically a tax if you just own a TV set.
It is a tax.
And that goes to the BBC. But why go to the Beeb?
Look, the BBC is the nation's... I mean, I hate to say it, but it's a national broadcast. And in times of great crisis, people do turn to the BBC in the moments of great triumph.
These aren't. They go to Netflix.
Yeah. But people don't go to Netflix for the news. They don't go to Netflix for sort of the World Cup or the sort of big national events. And I think the BBC is unique and it does have a role to play and needs to have a special model. I think it's a fantastic model. It's flawed, but it does work.
This is also showing more balance than the time that the BBC decided to do an entire segment on GBNews, by the way. But of course, they didn't have to worry about Ofcom because they could just review it themselves, and they decided they did wrongdoing, and then anyway, whatever. So there we go. Also, interestingly for the BBC, you say people flock to them in times of major events. Unfortunately for them, Hugh Edwards is narrating half of those times. So, the archive's gone.
That's a great point.
Anyway, in one of the most American stories I've ever heard, a plus-size rapper is suing a driver because he refused to let her in his car because he said she was too big. Check this out.
What?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What? For what? What you saying?
Yeah, I got no space. My car is small.
I can fit in this car.
No, believe me, you can.
Yes, I can.
Believe me. So, I'm sorry.
What am I gonna do about my money?
I'm gonna cancel it. You're not gonna be charged.
So you telling me I can't get in the lift because I can't fit in your car?
I mean, You know, so she's now launching legal action on that. So there we go. Coming up next, though, of course, is Headliners, presented tonight by the wonderful Josh Howie. And Josh, what have you got coming up for us?
Well, we're going to cover that Netflix story that you have just covered. We're also going to cover that very attractive woman trying to get into a car. We also have the end of the world. We have all of the front pages. We have a young footballing woman who has been banned from football for pointing out that someone on the opposite team was a man. Lots of stuff to get you angry just before bed.
Yeah, Jonathan, you really rolled your eyes there. Would you?
Oh, Patrick, we don't have time to talk about this.
Do you not think that's... So thank you, Josh, by the way. Have a great show there. Do you not think that's... what's wrong with a woman saying that she doesn't want to play football against a man?
I'd have to listen to the story before I can comment anything.
Pretty straightforward. Bloke turns up, plays women.
I think that trans people have a right to play sport.
OK, fair enough. In their own team, maybe? Or
well, just play with their own genders. That's quite easy, isn't it? They're male and female.
Oh, well, anyway, on that bombshell, we are going to have to go. Can I just say thank you very much? I've really enjoyed tonight's show. I hope you have at home or wherever you are consuming this after the traitors.
It's finished now, Patrick. Don't worry. It's finished.
Traitor.
It's finished, everybody.
Exactly.
It's over.
All right.
There are no traitors on this show.
Shut up. All right, I will see you again tomorrow at 9 p.m, hopefully. Until then, have a tremendous evening, and make sure you keep it GB News, because Headliners are up next, and Josh and the gang have got a great show lined up for you. Bye-bye.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Heading into tomorrow, it's going to be turning wet and windy once again across southern coasts. Brighter elsewhere, though we can't rule out a few showers for some. The reason it's been so unsettled is because we've had low pressure largely dominating the weather, but out to the west we do have a slight ridge of high pressure building, bringing in some finer conditions later on Tuesday through into Wednesday. For tonight, though, still plenty of showers feeding through, particularly across Wales and central areas of the UK, eventually dying out through the early hours of the morning, leaving plenty of clear spells. Still plenty of showers, longer spells of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, though. But with clearer skies, that means temperatures should soon dip away, so likely feeling chillier compared to recent nights. Then to start off tomorrow, there should be plenty of dry and bright weather around, still those showers in the north. Just need to keep an eye on this area of rain just starting to clip in to the far southwest during the